Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, Curryupstartup Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose driven Asian leaders making an impact. This is your host, Priyanka Kumla, joining you on our 99th episode of Curryupstartup Leadership Podcast. Thank you to each one of you as we ace our milestone 100th episode. It's going to come up very soon, so stay tuned by following me, Priyanka Kumla, and a Curryupstartup LinkedIn page for the podcast updates. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and a subscribe so you can stay tuned with all the upcoming video notifications that we have. All right, we have an amazing guest today, a different type of guest, I should say, and let me unveil who this is. We have Jay Shah, who's joining us from Arizona. Hey, Jay, welcome to the show.
Hey, nice to be here, Priyanka.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Jay. Jay comes across very subtle and humble, but you're going to see the other side of him, I promise. So, Jay is a PhD student at Arizona State University with a research focus on building deep learning models for biomarker discovery for Alzheimer's disease, as well as interpretable AI models for healthcare applications. He also hosts a podcast with machine learning engineers. Well, apart from those fun facts, he loves being at Arizona State University. So he's going to talk to us all about what does doing a PhD mean for an Indian student, but at the same time, his love for tennis. Yes, I see that racket right behind him as he's prepping up for his 21K. So, listeners, I'm quite sure you're super excited to know what Jay does on a daily basis. So, let's delve deep into it. Are you ready, Jay?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Jay. So let's start with your childhood. As a young student from Ahmedabad in the northern part of India, you came to pursue your education in the US, and here you are at Arizona State University. When you go back to those couple of years ago, how did it feel when you first put your foot into US?
Right. So, like, even before I came for my ASU, I had the chance to visit and come to United States for a conference, an IEEE conference back in 2017. And it was in Cincinnati. And because I had the travel sponsorship for that particular conference, I landed in Chicago, and I chose Chicago because of
The
my
weather?
love for Chicago. No, definitely not the weather, which is one thing I learned just after I landed over there. But I had seen all these movies, we see pictures, and Chicago was definitely one of my dream places to be. So I took around 2 or 3 days and I saw the downtown. I had a fun time over there, and that was one thing I realized, and that was my first step into US. And that's when I learned that whatever we see, whatever we have heard about US being a very dynamic place, a place where everything happens with a different set of energy, different set of people rushing in, people doing things. And that was one thing that I learned and I took back. And even I guess when I landed in Arizona for my masters, it was a different energy. It is like it yeah, you know what it feels like when people say US is a land of opportunity. That is what we feel when we come over here. People are with a different set of expectations, they have their own dreams, and everybody is working towards that. So yeah, definitely looking back, I definitely feel like a bit nostalgic when I think about India, Ahmedabad, and all those places. But definitely looking back, it definitely feels like I did a few things that I wanted to do in these 2 years, and it feels nice, definitely.
That's amazing to hear. In this episode, Jay, I want to break a couple of myths about, PhD student. You have a certain personality in mind, they could be boring or they have no other activities, but you are very unique. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to spotlight, saying like, hey, there are so many fun things that you can do while you're doing groundbreaking research. Like, for example, you work with a Nobel Laureate on some of these different applications. Now, before we delve into your research, I wanted to unveil a little bit more about you as a person. You believe in the philosophy that, pursuing your passions or networking, these are critical aspects of success apart from your college going carefree lifestyle. No, I shouldn't say carefree for a PhD student, but, for every college grad in the US. So tell us a little bit more about your thinking on those lines.
Yeah, I mean, networking is something I really advocate for, and I definitely strive myself to be better at than I am yesterday. And I think the key idea of networking comes from two places. The first and foremost is like my father, which is like he was the marketing manager for like 30 years. So if I see him, he's like the super person who would go out and talk to everyone and he would build amazing connections with people, and these are lifelong connections. And secondly is, even before I had my own podcast channel, I used to talk to a lot of seniors. They could be people, or who could be working at different big name companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. And they would often have these very nice insights that go along the importance of networking. They would say that being the most hardworking person in the room doesn't really help you anyways. They like, of course, that doesn't mean to undermine the hard work that you do, but having a skill or a knack for networking definitely goes a long way. So one thing that I definitely realized is that one way or the other I would be uh, becoming good at whatever I do. But networking or communicating your ideas in a very subtle and effective manner is something that really needs to take place. And if you see these people working at big name companies over like, let's say 10 years, that is one thing that they say, that I have really become good at communicating my ideas in the least number of words possible. So that is one thing that I've learned, and I advocate a lot. And again, that really bolstered me during working with, like you said, working with the Nobel Laureate. And that particular lab was very unique for me because I used, like, there was no one person who was from computer science background. And when I'm working with a high fidelity program, I had physicists, like, who had a deep background in physics. I had electrical engineers, I had mechanical engineers, I had material science engineers. And when I have these team meetings, when I go ahead and tell them about the algorithms I used, the mathematics that I did, or the programming that I did, that doesn't really help them, because they don't really care about how the programming looks like. They just want to know why I did it and how I did it. And we had these ways of communicating ideas, and over the time of few months we developed a protocol or a stencil for that particular answering key. So I guess that is what I think networking plays a role, which is like, being the smartest guy doesn't really mean anything. There could be tons of people, there are millions of people who are doing hard work, but if you can really communicate your ideas, you can collaborate, because without collaboration you cannot build anything. So I guess it's a chain of process. Like, communication leads to collaboration, and collaboration leads to building anything that you want. So yeah.
I like the structured way of thinking. I mean, it aligns perfectly with being a STEM professional, right? Being a STEM graduate. So let's delve deeper into your research. But before then, for our live listeners, we're going to give away one free mentoring session with Jay. So here's your opportunity to ask him any question that you would want, and also get a free session with him so you can get a chance to learn more about him as a person as well. So all you have to do is drop in a quick question or a comment, or just say hello to us, and we'd be happy to acknowledge you as well. So let's get into your research, Jay. I know you've been working with the Nobel Laureate and different stakeholders who come from diverse walks of STEM. So tell us a little bit more about your research projects and what keeps you going every day.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, the work with my Nobel laureate was maybe a year back. Like, that was one of the projects that I worked with him on a separate project that is different from my PhD study. And my work over there was mostly using machine learning techniques for art authentication systems. So we have these imaging techniques which are called hyperspectral imaging, which is basically 1,000 times much more rich than our human eyes. Like, we have three channels, the red, green, and blue, when we see things around using our human eyes. But hyperspectral theoretically can have thousands of these channels. So these cameras are used in satellites and a lot of other interesting domains where you don't even have the access to certain information as humans might perceive. And that was the idea of using these high channel, high fidelity data to understand art authentication systems. So this was much more of an exploratory research project than like the standard pure research, because you might understand, like, he's a person who delves into physics and all those core science areas, but this was much more of an exploratory topic. And my job was to use my expertise in computer vision to maybe put together an algorithm that can learn, like, for example, when we say this is a painting from Picasso, people take weeks and months to figure out if this is a fake painting versus a real painting in human cases. But to build a machine learning algorithm is like a taking it to the next level. We need to understand if this is really by Picasso or if this is a fake, if this is real pigments, are these colors original? When we say red color, what does it mean, red color? So we built these repository of colors, that was like how red color looks like to the hyperspectral camera, how orange color look like, what is the combination of these colors. And based on these pattern analysis of how Picasso paints in like maybe the last 200 years or 500 years, whatever set of paintings we had, and we built an algorithm that can do these things in just like few minutes, because machine learning algorithm might take few minutes to detect these things. And apart from that, I guess my work as a PhD student dwells along the lines of using machine learning for medical imaging majorly. It's mostly understanding how we can use machine learning, or specific enough deep learning, for understanding these long-term diseases, like you mentioned, Alzheimer's, post-traumatic headache, which is what my current focus is to understand what are the biomarkers, because the problem with these
And can you
diseases.
explain to us, Jay, what biomarkers mean in layman terms for us?
So biomarkers, for example, right now, let's take the example of Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's would have certain set of milestones. Let's say for medical professionals, if you exhibit certain set of symptoms, the doctor might classify you as a person who would have Alzheimer's or who would develop an Alzheimer's in the next 5 years. So biomarkers are basically these set of milestones in terms of symptoms you face. So let's say if you're facing certain set of symptoms and you have a neurodegeneration in your brain scan, then doctors might suggest that you might take medications for Alzheimer's. But the problem with these biomarkers is there is not a concrete amount of research from medical community that can say for sure that this person, like, definitely, if he or she has, then definitely this person will have Alzheimer's in the next 5 years. It's much more of a trial and error basis. So what we are trying to use this is, because deep learning inherently is good at pattern classification, anomaly detection, we are trying to use deep learning on these rich neuroimaging data and understand what are these biomarkers that you might develop. So we are trying to do an early detection, that if I let's say have Priyanka's MRI scan, I can actually say that in the next 15 years, because I see X, Y, and Z things in your brain, you might develop. So it is safe for you to take these medications. So I'm trying to save you from a very long-term illness much beforehand. So that is the goal of medicine industry right now. So yeah, that's a part of my research focus right now.
That's very fascinating. Hey, 15 years from now, if I have an issue, right, it's good to know proactively what should I do, in terms of daily habits and routines that I should build to not succumb to such challenges. But tell me
Yeah.
this, Jay, it's super fascinating, and I want to say congratulations and thank you for, being part of such impactful projects for the society, because healthcare is like pretty crucial, right? You've seen it after the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So let's talk about, you as an Asian, as a person of color. Have you faced any challenges as you work your way through your PhD or trying to make that meaningful contributions when you're working with, very distinguished people in the society?
Um, to be honest, I would say no, because I haven't really faced any explicit kind of seclusion from these particular processes. I mean, there are certain places that have advertisement over that they don't sponsor immigration visas and all those places. There is definitely public knowledge over there, because of the inherent nature of what the company works or on the data that it deals with, the kind of sensitive information. But to be honest, I haven't been a part of such kind of any troubles as an immigrant. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. I mean, definitely I keep on hearing stories, which definitely is a different matter of discussion. But fortunately, I haven't been a part of that particular problem or trouble that most of the people of color might face over here.
That's good to know that things are changing. But what advice would you have? One advice for students who are willing to pursue PhD in the United States?
I would say, I mean, first of all, if the question is much more focused to the PhD, I would say definitely, like, first of all, PhD doesn't really provide any incentives that lure people to get into a PhD. So you really have to be focused and really interested into research, I would say, because at the end, like 5 years is a long amount of time to do your research. So with little or no incentives and coming with a huge amount of financial burden for immigrants, I guess those kind of factors people should know. But I think on the brighter side of PhD, I think the only good thing about PhD is you get to work and you get to choose your own projects, so you can really be creative about it. Like you can take any of the project, like for example, the project that I took was completely under my interest. It was basically I tried to pitch in my ideas that, hey, why can we do this, why can't we do that? And I like the professor would just say, yeah, that's a great idea, go ahead and do your research and get back to me, and then he or she would give me inputs based on her or his research experience. But the kind of independence that we get and the kind of exposure as a PhD student that you get to the academia or research is definitely much more than what I think we get from industries, because industries are much more focused on solving a particular problem in a particular set of manner, and rather PhD is much more all about you. It's like if you are not good at, you might do a very bad PhD. If you are good at, you can do and explore your own set of skills in a very different manner. So I would say for people who might be interested into doing a PhD, first of all, I would suggest them to dig down and at least get your hands dirty with research, because research definitely sounds very glamorous at the first aspect. But even there are days that even I feel like I regret taking PhD decisions at now. But definitely it's a very temporary thing. But at the end, I love doing research. But definitely I had a lot of experience. I took a lot of internships. I did my masters before doing a PhD just to understand how the research market or the research field looks like. So I would say just take few instances or few milestones that make you understand what research could look like. Do you fit really into the PhD profile? And if that really fits for you, definitely go ahead. It's a good field. It's definitely something, a place to be, because a lot of research is becoming really exponential right now. If you see a lot of avenues opening up with new technologies, new algorithms, research definitely has many things to offer. So
That's
yeah.
fascinating to hear in terms of the kind of opportunities that we would be exposed to. So let's talk a little bit about machine learning. As a layman, why should I care about machine learning, deep learning? How is it going to really affect me or impact me in my day-to-day life and the applications that I use?
Yeah. So one of the few things that I really advocate about deep learning is you see a lot of digitization around you. You see a lot of data that you as a person are generating versus you as a person are consuming. So we are looking at, and if this is the rate, this is just like what I'm talking about the last 3 or 4 years. But fast forward, this is like growing at exponential stages. People are getting devices in their hands and in their places a lot. So starting from important works to your entertainment, a lot of things are becoming digitalized. And a problem that comes obviously with it is managing these data to the best set of manner. And people are becoming very, I would say, particular about the things that they consume and that they generate. So this is where when we talk about huge amounts of data and trying to think about personalization, this is where the machine learning's sweet spot is. So everything around you, starting from whatever you do, like these podcasts and these for example, the content that you post has a certain way of getting to people, how it is being analyzed, how it is being reacted, and all those things start like basic. These are very basic things in terms of human lifestyle. But I think machine learning, like at least knowing about machine learning, is going to be very critical, because you're trying to like indulge into, like, let's say 5 hours of your day in on social media or any kind of other digital platforms. It's good to know that what machine learning is, like the content that I'm consuming, what does it have at its back end, just to understand what it feels like. And definitely for software developers or computer science researchers, this is like the big thing. Like, of course, there are many other different avenues of computer science, like database systems, high performance computing, and all those things. I'm definitely not going to say that those are lesser important than machine learning, but machine learning is something that we are seeing at an exponential stage growing up. Those field systems and all those have been here for like last 30 years or 40 years. People are developing, but machine learning is something that is really increasing over these times, and it is a good field to be in if you're really creative. You can take this field to anywhere. Like, for example, I have seen these young startups doing amazing things. Like, we couldn't even imagine that machine learning could have a space over there. And medical industry is one of that. Like, just one good person few years back thought that imaging data could have a intersection with machine learning, and let's do biomarker discovery, and it's doing great marvels right now. So it's a machine gun, I would say, that people can learn to fire, and it's a good thing if they are creative, they can hit the jackpot. So it's an interesting field with a lot of interest, I would say, in terms of usage and generations.
That's fascinating to hear in terms of how the future is going to look like and some of the innovations that you are working on. We have a question from one of our live listeners. We have Janani Rangarajan, who's joining us. She's the chair of Bioinformatics for the University on the West Coast. She would like to know the difference or the similarities between the three fields: machine learning, data science, and bioinformatics, if you would like to answer that.
Yeah, definitely. So I think these are three very different, I would say, in some ways, and at the end, they are very overlapping regions. Machine learning is a much more broader field that has nothing to do with the applications. It is at the end a few set of understanding of few algorithms and how to deal with data. We could have these data in terms of financial tabular data, for example, your patient informations, or it could be imaging data, or it could be text data that a lot of NLP models are built. So I think machine learning is the field that really deals with understanding these kind of mathematical models and building those mathematical models in order to generate a certain output. On the other hand, data science has to do with a lot of data pre-processing things. For example, these models that machine learning builds cannot just crunch in the data as we humans do. For example, you might see, like, it's just our eyes that sees the text data versus the imaging data versus the tabular data, but this is not machine learning understands. Like, we need to create those data sets into a certain manner in order to feed these algorithms, or else they are equally garbage. So data science, in my understanding, is understanding those data, pre-processing those data, trying to eliminate data that are harming the models to understand, because a lot of redundant data is bad for machine learning. And understanding those sciences, it is at the junction of using machine learning versus what data it should go in. Because if I put in bad data, I like it's like garbage in garbage out technology. So if I put in garbage, I definitely cannot expect. So I think data science is the tool, is the field that deals with those kind of things. And bioinformatics is a very I would say hybrid field that works on the junctions of all these three things that I'm saying, at the domain knowledge of people who are dealing with medical experts. So for example, not all, like, for example, a very hot debate that even you might have seen is machine learning models are check magnets for biases. We have a lot of biases that go into predicting a certain classifications. So but at the end, not all biases are bad biases. Like, some biases are good. For example, there are few diseases that are specific to, let's say, gender. Like, women get certain diseases at a much lesser rate than males do. But to understand these things, you need to you need to have a person that understands those diseases much better than machine learning model, because machine learning model is just ones and zeros. So bioinformatics is something that has tried to use these and incorporate these tools, machine learning, in order to use at their own benefit. So they're like, for example, for me, when I'm working with these deep learning technologies, I'm trying to tweak these deep learning models so that it serves the purpose of medical professional who is trying to deal with the data. So I'm trying to understand what the doctor wants, what the machine learning model can do, and what is the thing that is really innovative, for example, biomarker discovery. So bioinformatics is something that deals with along these lines, that definitely has to do with data. I need to process the data much differently. Like, if I'm dealing with just cats and dogs images, that is much different than how I'm treating MRI scans. I need to understand what is the significance of voxels. So I think bioinformatics is something on the intersection of these beautiful domains.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that very, simple and easy answer where we could really comprehend these three different fields. And thank you, Janani, for that interesting question as well. To our live listeners, feel free to drop in a quick question or a comment for Jay as well. Now let's talk about setbacks. As a PhD, as a researcher, I see the fascinating side of working on impactful projects, but as you mentioned, there are some days where you question about, what am I really doing? So how do you face those low moments in your life?
I mean, it's an active area of improvement even for me, I guess. But I think the way I deal with it is research has to be like it's what we say is like 99 setbacks and one good day is what it takes to a good research. So definitely it's something looking forward that one day definitely is something that really keeps on going. But I mean, one thing that really sticks to me is what the professor Frank Wilczek that I work with is said that uh, if you like, no research is bad research. So even if the results that you got are not something that you expected, that is like a one step forward to moving forward to what you really want. So if let's say one result that I got that is bad, if I look at that, hey, this is like the dead end, that is a very wrong approach. I need to understand it. It's like in a way of it's a step by step process. I need to understand what those results meant. Like, am I closer enough to what I want? Am I closer enough to what is the expectations? If I'm not, I need to take another approach. It's like the classical mathematical models. Even for example, like people who understand machine learning understand there is this term called gradient descent, which is like it's like a slope thing. If you remember, like the saddle point, like you just need to understand, do I need to go right or left? Because if I'm going right, if I'm like getting close enough, then I need to keep on going right, like taking small steps. But if I have to go left, then it's just a matter of right or left selection. So I think that is the way. Like, I don't treat any setbacks as setbacks. I just think that, okay, I'm just one step closer, or maybe one step ahead, or maybe one step reverse. I'm going in the reverse direction. I just need to change my directions. So I guess that's how I deal with them.
I love the analogy, and I'm going to use it when I'm facing setbacks, right? The way you look at it in a very mathematical, scientific way brings a very different mindset altogether.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. So let's talk about your amazing podcast where you host machine learning experts and researchers to talk about their career journey. So tell us a bit more, and where can people find it?
Yeah, definitely. So I post out these podcasts just like what Priyanka does, and like definitely a much more tuned down version of that. Like, I'm definitely, I have a lot to learn from Priyanka about podcasting, but
Oh, thank you.
I
That's so
post.
kind of you. I'm still
No.
learning.
Yeah, it's definitely always a learning curve. But I post out these podcasts on YouTube majorly, and recently I have been trying to post out them on even Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. But a little bit about that podcast, it's like I invite experts in machine learning. I have invited people who are professors, who are entrepreneurs, who are software developers, who are researchers, who are applied researchers. And even in the next few months, I have few journalists who would be talking about AI. So I try to, the goal of those podcasts is to just see machine learning from a different aspect. Because if you see, professors look at machine learning differently than what software developers look at, and what researchers look versus what journalists look at AI. And my goal is, when I started, like in the first place, when I started those podcasts, was to help beginners. It was just like people who read machine learning and AI jargons in Medium or media articles. They often find very glamorous that, hey, AI can do great stuff, but at the same time feel very overwhelmed. Like, how do I start? How do I get to this? And oftentimes, most of these interests burn out when they actually get into the mathematics and learning about those skills. So my goal was to make it much more top view level understanding. I wanted people to see what machine learning should look like, how can they get started, and understand from like the best people in these fields. So let's say reinforcement learning, data science, AI, and all those teams. So I used to talk to these people, and I said to my friends that, why don't I make this thing public? I would just get consent from people that, can I record you, and can I have these podcasts online, so that greater set of people can get benefited by it. So that is what I do through this podcast. I try to demystify what actually really machine learning is, because at the end, it's not something that's black boxy, or something that not a lot of people can do. Anybody can do. I mean, if you have a love for mathematics, and if you have some creativity, anybody can do. So that is what I try to do through this podcast. I try to bridge the gap between being an expert and being a beginner. And yeah, I post out these podcasts on YouTube. So definitely, I hope any beginner who is watching this thing and is interested about machine learning, please go ahead. I try to diversify my speaker sets. So yeah, hopefully people are much more enthusiastic about machine learning.
Yeah, and Jay is being very humble. He has a huge amount of subscribers and a very high engagement rate on all his podcasts, which I love. As a fellow podcaster, when I see such engagement with the listeners, that gives me a high, and I'm super happy for you, Jay. So before we move on to the next question, do let us know the name of the YouTube channel so people can go find it out.
Yeah, so the channel goes by my name itself. It's Jay Shah, but just a heads up, like Jay Shah is like the most common first name and last name in India. So I would say for people anyone searching for it, I would say just type in Jay Shah machine learning or Jay Shah AI podcast. I guess that would be much more helpful to search those podcasts. But yeah,
Awesome. We'll post a link in our episode
yeah.
notes. So you'll get a chance to check out his YouTube channel as well. Now, let's delve a little bit deeper into you as a person. What is an accomplishment that you're really very proud of when you look back at your PhD or even your journey all the way from Ahmedabad to the US?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's a tricky question because I mean I don't know if I'm really proud of anything, but I would certainly like to think so. I'm proud of it. Is something that you mentioned at the start of this podcast is like understanding the breadths and depths of machine learning. That is what at least I would say I enjoy. I don't know if I would classify that as an accomplishment for me, but uh, a lot of people at the same age, and when I see a pool of my friends who are at different places working, I often find either they are in one of those pools, like either they are exploring the breadths, which is like understanding how the software develop, which is definitely great and definitely unique and in itself a great skill in itself. But I wanted to get a better overview, so I try to keep these set of, I would say, goals that I regularly do that tries to explore these machine learning domains on different aspects. So breadth is something that I try to do through this podcast. For example, I reach out to people, I talk, I read, and I read their articles in a much more different sense than I would get into the depths. But on the other hand, I would also, for example, for my PhD, I'm trying to much more delve into the depth of a particular area. For example, Alzheimer's, I'm trying to understand in depth like what Alzheimer's means from a medical perspective, what those machine learning models look like in specific to Alzheimer's and post-traumatic headache diseases. So I'm trying to understand the depth. So I try to keep my feet in two boats, I would say. Like I try to do that because I to be honest enough, that is like the source number one inspiration for me. I mean, if you look at different fields, for example, medical imaging in its first place, it got started because some person did that what I'm trying to do right now. It's like trying to keep two feet in different boats and trying to understand, like, can I use machine learning and can I use medical imaging to develop these biomarkers. So I often try to do those things. Again, I wouldn't say that would be somewhere along the lines of accomplishment, what the society looks at accomplishments for. But I definitely like to think that I enjoy doing that. I like to learn about what different domains like reinforcement learning, a lot of human aware AI, interpretability, and all those aspects from a psychological or philosophical perspective, and try to bring in those creative thoughts into my line of research and make it much more reliable and human understandable. AI is something that people fear, but I would say that AI is your biggest friend, and I try to bring in those concepts. So yeah, that what I would say, that exploring the breadths and depths of machine learning is really that I pride myself doing it.
That's lovely, Jay. And I'm so glad you're thinking outside of, hey, these are the societal milestones. And sometimes as Asians, we have these stereotypical milestones that we have to achieve by a certain age. But I'm so glad you're taking a very different path where you're pursuing your passion with your own happiness. So kudos to you on that line of thinking. We have a fun rapid fire round for you. Are you ready for it?
Sure, yeah, let's do it.
I love it when I have a fellow podcaster on the other side of the hot seat. All right. So you tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following, and in one word, role model.
Okay. Hmm. Roger Federer.
What does happiness mean to you?
One word would be something, I guess, hard, but I would say doing something that you find meaningful, I would say, that you find it fulfilling enough.
How do you define success?
Hmm. I guess it would be something related to this past answer is like doing something that you really find enjoying. I mean, I hate to put milestones. Like for example, I hate to put milestones. Like if I did this, I consider myself successful or something like that. If if you're doing something that you are enjoying it, and you find that if you find that that is meaningful, you are successful, I would say.
Like how we do podcast, right? As hosts, we find a
Yeah.
lot of happiness and success doing that.
Yeah, to be honest, yes, yes.
So I know a lot of our listeners, and especially Jay's fans of his podcast, would love to know what is one fun thing about Jay that's very exclusive to our Career Startup Leadership Podcast listeners.
Hmm. I would say a fun thing would be, and definitely this is a career podcast, so I would say cooking is something I really enjoy, which is like apart from all these technical things I try to do thing, but experiments with cooking, I would say that is not something available online. I try to experiment with what, based on my understanding of what ingredients taste and versus how Indian cooking style looks like. I try to oftentimes mix things. They are not always good, definitely. There are times I I have to cook something else at the night to go to a good sleep, but definitely I try to experiment myself. I'm a vegetarian, so I try to doing different salads, soups, based on understanding how things go. But yeah, that is one fun thing I like to do.
So you have your own algorithm, which is your secret recipe success for success. And I
Yeah,
love the way how you manifested the podcast uh, name and the brand into your fun thing. So creativity
yeah.
there. All right. So one last question for you. What is your native language, and one word to describe yourself in it?
Oh boy. Uh, I mean, my native language is Gujarati because I'm from Gujarat. But one word, that's really hard one, because I would say, so there is this word, but I'm quoting my father because this happened like maybe few weeks back, where he actually tried to taunt me about something, and he said there is a word called vicharshil, which actually means it literally will translate to a person who is like considerate, or maybe thoughtful, or maybe like thinking, like not thoughtful, but like considerate, like the person who is always considerate about its surroundings. Like for example, if I want to take a decision, I would be considering A, B, C options into its place, and then taking a decision. So that is like the kind of person. And actually, the compliment he was trying to make was the opposite of that. He was trying to say to me, like, stop being so much considerate about things. You're being too much of what you would say like vichashil. And he said, try to be much more impromptu, try to be a much more person like who can just take decisions instantly. So but yeah, I would say, at the end, I would say I call myself vichashil, like person who is always thoughtful of its surroundings, and taking the, like, understanding the risks and then taking the decisions.
So more like a calculated risk kind of a person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah,
it's good to have these angles of compassion and empathy for people around you, be it surroundings or people who are in your life. So
yeah.
it's good actually when we hear it from our parents, right? Like what they think of us. That's typical of our Asian parents.
Yeah, yeah, and it's really weird because most of my friends, when I see, it's the other way around. Like people are ask like parents are asking children to be thoughtful, like being considerate. And for me, it's like the opposite. Like they are asking me to stop being so much considerate, try to take some risks and do whatever you want with your life.
I'm glad you're in the
So
good books of your parents. That's a nice to have, thing for a young Indian professional. All right, so that brings us to the end of our episode. This was super exciting for me, Jay, getting to know about machine learning, the wonderful projects that you're working on, especially in the field of Alzheimer's and biomarkers related to it. And the second aspect being the fun side of you, some of the philosophy that awakens you and enlightens you. So I'm super glad you had the time outside of your busy PhD schedule to talk to us about life as a PhD student in machine learning. Do you have any parting thoughts for us?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, thanks for having me over here. I definitely enjoyed a lot. Like a lot of questions really made me to think back about what I really think about those questions. And definitely, I'm definitely a subscriber for your particular thing, your
Thank you.
particular podcasts. I love to watch them on LinkedIn. So definitely, and definitely, I would suggest anyone like regardless of whatever your background is. I really enjoy the diverse set of speakers you have, and definitely I guess I'm the 99th, so definitely you have your 100th one coming up, and you have some young entrepreneurs that I saw their podcast that you invited them, and definitely they are much more of inspiration, like the way they think and the way they look at their particular what work that they do definitely is inspiring. So for all those people who are tuned in right now or maybe listening to this review is definitely I would suggest to check out more of Priyanka's podcast. Like I love going back. I haven't complete to be honest, I haven't completed all of them, but I definitely it's on my loop, or it is on my podcast app, and definitely I'll be listening to them whenever I get time. So I would suggest anyone to feel free to follow Priyanka, and definitely keep up the great work. I really like the guests you invite, and it's definitely much more thoughtful of you. So yeah.
Thank you, Jay. You made my day. What better way than getting all these kind words from a podcaster in a very unscripted way? So, I'm super honored that you took the time to talk about our episodes and uh, listening to our content. When I get some feedback like this from my direct listeners, that keeps me going. That's my philosophy. And to our listeners, the 100th episode is going to come very soon. We're going to have a live worldwide YouTube watch party. So stay tuned by following me, Priyanka Komla, and a Curryupstartup podcast page on LinkedIn to get those LinkedIn live notifications. And if you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe there as well. And as a sneak peek, given Jay is my special guest for today, I'm going to unveil my co-hosts. I shouldn't say I'm not going to be hosting the show, so I'm letting two young entrepreneurs host the show. One being Namya Joshi, who was the recipient of India's highest civilian award, the Bala Award for Young Innovators on Republic Day from Prime Minister Modi, India's Prime Minister. So she's from India. And then I also have another co-host who's going to be Nethala Nimsit, who's a young entrepreneur. Both are 14-year-old kids. He's from Sri Lanka, and he hosts his own show, which is called Cinnamon Chat with Nethala. And, amazing young innovators, Jay. I'm super, thrilled when I hear a lot of, how the young generation is taking a different take at life. So, not following the usual milestones like what, to some extent, we had to do in our life a little bit. But thank you so much, Jay. And to our listeners, do follow Jay Shah's podcast. You can find it on YouTube, and we'll leave a link to his Mission Learning podcast as part of our episode notes. And one key takeaway on this 99th episode of Curryupstartup Leadership Podcast with Jay Shah is, communication, networking, those are critical tools to success, irrespective of your field, be it PhD, technology, or any kind of a profession that you're in. So thank you so much, Jay. I'll leave you there with that, amazing key takeaway. And we'll see you guys soon on our 100th episode. So if you're going to hear this on a podcast platform like what Jay Shah does, give us a like and subscribe, so I know that how this podcast has helped you become a better version of yourself. Until our 100th episode, this is Priyanka Komla signing off from Curryupstartup Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. Thank you.